I think that opens a new, a whole new way of, a whole new area of, kind of gray area of, what can happen, if that particular computer's security is compromised. For the most part, the console computer only runs like AC, the radio, and accessories like that. It does not really change the way the car drives, but potentially it can have an interface to update the ECU and other more critical parts. It makes sense though, because you have one centralized computer that has access to either satellite or 3G. Okay, so potentially a manufacturer can actually try to update the ECU software by using that main computer that has network access. So the question now is, it's entirely up to the software to decide when to tell the ECU to reprogram itself. Okay, do you guys still remember Stuxnet, the virus that infected the Iranian nuclear plant? If something like that infects your car, it can potentially cause problems, like safety issues, because it can try to update software on a component when it's not supposed to, or update it with faulty software. Yep.
Even just that repo story, if somebody knew how to hack into their system to do it themselves, like to take over another person's car, like if they can do it to repossess your car, then the avenue is already there.
Yep. Exactly. Yep.
That GPS system comes out with a lot of the cars now. Has had that where they can somebody steals your car, and your car disabled, shut off. They know exactly where it's at. They can unlock it, lock the doors. They can start your car for you if you lose your keys, all that stuff. So they've got the potential of running your car just about, except for driving it.
Well, remember the Google cars? Yes, they can.
Yeah.
Your car can drive away all by itself. Your car can detect it.
Drive down the repo lot. It can drive itself down to the repo lot.
Exactly. Your car, one night your car just kind of starts itself because this is like 5 minutes past the deadline to pay the pay the bills, and the car goes like, I think you haven't paid the bills yet. This is the second month already. I'm driving back to the dealership. Another good reason to put tin foil over the entire car.
Yep. Could you just not, if you know your bill's coming, could you just not put fuel in it so it couldn't drive away?
But then you cannot drive it either.
They probably have an override for that too.
Yep. I have no idea because I don't know anyone who's in the car business, but I'm pretty sure the technology is there and it is being used because it's worth the money to install those systems on cars. I think, cops eventually will be able to stop a car remotely. When they're chasing a car, they don't have to chase. All they have to do is to figure out, okay, this car is going down this way, it has to get to that intersection, and they can just program, the computer of that intersection to send a signal to stop this specific car. Yep.
If they were install OnStar in every vehicle, all the police officer would have to do is be able to identify the OnStar, and they could shut it off.
Yep.
So the technology is there. They just haven't implemented it yet.
So crooks need to find all those rare old 68 Mustangs.
Yeah.
To make sure it cannot be disabled remotely, right? There's no electronic on this car to be disabled.
That brings to mind that Toyota situation with the accelerator. Was that a circuitry problem or was that a component problem?
I think it was a combination of things, but I think it is resolved, at least according to Consumer Reports, the magazine. The issue is now resolved, and Toyotas can now be recommended again by the Consumer Report magazine. So I think they got it fixed. They figure out what's wrong with it. They also installed a mechanical override safety system. So when you engage the brakes to a certain point, it will just mechanically, electromechanically shut off the fuel system, or do something about it mechanically, so that it cannot, even if the software says open full throttle and deliver fuel, the fuel line or some other mechanism will get in the way and say, no, we're going to shut off fuel delivery because of that. So they need multiple fail-safe and not just rely on software, these days. what kind of bugs me more is the steer by wire. That bugs me even more, because with ignition you can kind of just turn it off or put it in neutral. There are many ways to slow down the vehicle if you kind of stay calm and know what you're doing. But with steering, it's a different story. Okay, if your steering wheel is no longer steering because the software crashes or something, then you really have no control at all. Except to slow down the car by putting on the brakes. So that can be really dangerous if the steering is gone just suddenly like that. And more cars have a steer by wire. So that bugs me more than throttle by wire. Okay, let's talk about the operating system, which we kind of got into, because we were talking about, the car systems, whether they're going to run Windows or some, custom operating systems. When you write a report, you kind of have to tell me what operating system you plan to install on it. Okay, most people would install Windows. I can definitely understand that people don't want to switch to Linux because there are certain things you cannot do in Linux. So in this case, in Windows, you have to tell me, which version of Windows do you want to install? Windows 7, definitely, but do you want to install Home? Do you want to install, what are the other variants of 7? Professional?
Premium, then there's Ultimate.
Okay. So you guys will have to do some research to find out, how much each one will cost and why do you want to upgrade to the next available version. Okay? And for people who want to install Linux, you can do some research and tell me which distro or which distribution of Linux do you want to install. I don't really need, really a long paragraph to describe the rationale, but just a mentioning would be good. Like Debian is one, Ubuntu is a popular one, but there are other ones like, Red Hat or Fedora, and SUSE and so on. And some people may even consider dual booting. In other words, you can install more than one operating system on the computer at the same time. So it gives you the flexibility to run Windows when you want to, and you can also switch to Linux if you want to experiment with Linux. Okay. Has anyone set up a dual booting system in this class? Few, okay. Now, more importantly, I really should be changing the order here. You should first look at what type of application programs do you want to install first. Okay, we have a whole variety of these, applications. The first category will be Office Suite, type of applications, word processing, spreadsheet, database, and so on. Okay, you have choices. You have Open Office as one choice, which is free. You can also install Microsoft Office.
Nowadays they're having most of those Office programs online, so can we specify that we don't want to?
Yeah, that's fine. Yep. In that case, you can just say you want to do it online using like Google Apps, something Google Docs.
Yeah.
Yep. Games is a big thing, because you can play games online too, but online games never really give you the same, performance as a game that is installed. Photoshop, type, or image editing. Okay. So in other words, you have to kind of mention what type of programs or how you want to use the system, that you are putting together. With some people, you can tell me that you want to run a 3D rendering program. That's perfectly fine. Because in that case, you need a higher-end processor, potentially a higher-end graphics card too. But for others, if you're just running, Microsoft Office, you don't need, a really high-end system. If you want to install CS5, Creative Suite 5 from Adobe, you need a lot of hard drive space. You also need a lot of RAM in order to run those programs effectively. Are there any questions at this point? No questions? Once you determine what applications you want to run, then you can select the operating system. Because some applications only run with Windows and others only run with Linux. or some run better with Linux, than it does run, with Windows. Okay. Any questions at this point? No questions?
I got a question.
Yep.
Because I've worked on a lot of computers that have dual boot, but I've never set it up myself. Do you
Mhm.
just partition the drives separately?
Yeah, you do have to partition the drives first so that you have enough space for the other operating system.
Okay.
The other way to run multiple operating systems at the same time, and also a safer way to do it, is to use virtual machines. Virtual machines, takes away some performance. In other words, if you use a virtual machine to run Linux inside Windows, the virtual machine running Linux cannot run Linux at full speed. But it is very safe because the so-called hard drive to the virtual machine is just a big file in Windows, so it cannot cause any type of damage to the NTFS partition that you normally use. Yep.
I read that it's important if you're going to dual boot using Windows
Mhm.
and something else to install Windows first.
Yes.
Because
It
if
will
you
wipe
install
out
a
the other
second,
one.
it will screw with the other OS
Yep.
while installing it.
That is absolutely true. I have one student from my CISP class, that met yesterday, and he said that he lost the MBR when he tried to install Ubuntu on top of Windows. And that's new to me because I have installed Windows on top of Ubuntu. I have installed Ubuntu on top of Windows, having Windows being installed first, and then install Ubuntu. And I have not had any problem with the one that I have. But with Debian, I know for sure because my netbook came with Windows 7, but I decided to also install Debian Linux on top of that, and I do not have any issues like that. In other words, you want to back up, at least the important files and the master boot record first if you want to set up a dual booting system, because sometimes you have to recover the MBR, if the installation was not successful. Okay. So that's about it. I mean, that's basically all. This is all the components of your report. It does not have to be written like an English paper. Okay. In fact, I prefer the outlined mode like this, to a paragraph mode, because it's much easier for me to locate the components that I want to locate in your report than reading paragraphs after paragraphs after paragraphs. Okay. Yep.
So we're basically just doing the box itself. We're not doing anything as far as picking like a monitor or anything.
Yeah, just the box itself, and also specifying what type of app, what you intend to do with the box.
Okay, but we don't need to specify like I'm using this monitor or this speakers. Or...
Yeah, the peripherals, they're inexpensive enough, and that it also changes, quickly. In other words, a 22-inch, LCD monitor used to be like super duper expensive, and now they're what, $150 or so. So so that part I don't really need you guys to talk about. If you want to talk about it, that's fine. I mean, that's perfectly fine. But if you don't want to, that's okay too. Okay. Any questions at this point? No questions. So I will make this. I will finish this up and make it into a homework assignment. The due date will be 1 week from today. If you have been following up on these topics for the past 3 or 4 weeks, it should be just minor work to put everything back together into one single document. On the other hand, if someone has not been doing anything for the past few weeks and missing classes at the same time, this can be a little bit of a challenge. For people who have not done this before. If you have done it before, it will take you a few hours to put it together, and it's not a big deal. So let me make sure I save this one first. This one is definitely important. And now we can finally move